feels like something's different with Minnesota. What have you observed from the Wolves to see this improved offense over this month, Dane?
Let's go in reverse order. Let's start with the last game. The Denver game that they played great. I think it was the best game of the season, won by 28 or 29. And what worked offensively in that game, surprisingly to people, probably because they think he's trash at offense, was Rudy Gobert was awesome. And specifically, you talk about Ant taking all of those threes. The real adjustment that we've seen almost every single night is every team is putting 2 on the ball. Rudy comes up and sets a screen for Ant, 2 on the ball. Nuggets were doing that with Jokic. It's Brown, and it's Jokic up there, basically just trapping Ant. So you're not getting that 3, right? You can't just step into that 3. You need to find the rolling big in the middle of the floor. The problem with the Wolves starting 5 is he doesn't have the most sure hands, or those when he drops it, it's just such an energy suck, and it kind of falls apart. But Ant repeatedly and consistently in the first quarter found Rudy Gobert there, and Rudy caught it, found Jaden McDaniels cutting from the corner. He found one time like Jamal Murray rotated over as the low man. All right, got a 6'2" guy on me. I'm just going to turn and dunk and finish. And then even had a couple of push shots in that game that he took there. Rudy Gobert operating effectively in the middle of the floor is gigantic for the Wolves offense, because it is the counter to teams taking away Anthony Edwards, which if you're the Wolves, you can't have happen. They did that against Denver. They're going to see that coverage again and again and again, and they need to go to that action again and again and again, because you know what happens? What Denver did. They turn away from it. They stop playing that coverage. They put Jokic in a deep drop. And then you know what happens when Jokic is in a deep drop? All right, let's set that same screen with Rudy and step into a 3, step into a 3, step into a 3, and you get back to that volume and the Wolves' most effective offense, which is Ant stepping into 3s. You need to do something to create that to happen if the defense is taking it away.
I mean, you mentioned Anthony Edwards, how, facing 2 and Rudy Gobert able to help, off of those roles, creating for others. There's this quote from, Ant over the weekend, how he's consulted Michael Jordan. He reached out to him. How do you deal with double teams? It was from Mark Jones over at ESPN. He looked for advice because he's been frustrated with that. Yeah. He's talked about that openly. He said, a couple of weeks ago, I don't want to be facing all these double teams. Are you seeing progress from him in that category? It was more just about like how everybody else is performing off of those blitzes and pick and rolls, off of the doubles that he's seeing.
The 2 times, Kevin, that he's blown up to us in the media after the games were Oklahoma City and Boston, and so that's not even just putting 2 on the ball. That's putting 2 Boston defenders, putting 2 OKC defenders on him. And what was funny about that Boston one in particular was like, he did what he did in that Denver game. He got off of it, and like the surrounding players made like 55% of their threes that game. So it was weird. I walk into the locker room. I'm like, what? Like, you just want to score? Like, this worked. You barely lost this game to Boston, but like, it was because you need to first get off of it, let your guys go, and then take advantage of the defense adjusting off of it. And he never, in that Boston game, before he blew up and said that, like he didn't get to that part of it, but the surrounding pieces were there. So I take this Denver game on Saturday to be a growth and learning from Ant of like X equals Y, and that's it's the interesting thing, right, about covering a 23-year-old kid is you want him to be great, and he can be, but there's steps in this process that are learning. And it's weird with hits sometimes, like the playoffs last year. Sometimes it feels like he's got it. All right, the playmaking's there. He's, Phoenix is guarding him this way. He's finding the guy in the corner. Denver's guarding him this way. He's finding him his teammates in other sort of ways. He can't get bored with that. Because if you go to it enough, they're going to adjust and they're going to let you go. I think those games, I think the OKC game was end of December and the Boston one was like a couple days later, and he was frustrated, but here we are at the end of the month, and it's like, all right, we got 48 minutes of tape in this Denver game against every coverage. This is how you do it, and he still got his 34. Like, it's the biggest thing is beating those double teams and being patient in how you do.
I mean, to his point, like earlier in the season, guys are not finishing off of those situations. He's getting blitzed more than anybody in the NBA. That's not just, an overall statement. It's factual. He's getting blitzed 16% of the time out of pick and rolls this season. It's the number one mark in the NBA, ahead of like a guy like Stephen Curry, ahead of Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, guys like that. So for Ant, now success is coming off of those actions. You mentioned Gobert making better decisions, whether as a scorer or a passer, and you mentioned a play where McDaniels was cutting from the corner in that situation. McDaniels has also been a hell of a lot better in January. He got off to a really up and down start over the first few months from Minnesota. What's been better with him throughout the month of January besides just better shooting numbers? Is there anything else?
It's not shooting numbers. It's just quicker decisions out of the corner and actually not shooting corner threes. Shooting 28% from the corners this season. And it's literally like the last 5 games, he's like doing this thing where the ball's coming to him in the corner where a lot of like, a guy that's going to normally hit a corner three at a 40% clip if they're open, like he's not that. So he's catching, he's almost getting his feet started before to catch and go, like immediately, and making that 0.5 mentality that Finch talks about all the time. He's making these quick decisions to not never take a corner three, but if there's an opportunity that use his 6'11" frame to go and finish at the basket, find a lob to Rudy, keep the ball moving. Like the biggest thing, Kevin, is he's making quick decisions out of the corner, and he's often making decision to not shoot the corner three. We've gotten to this point too much, I think, around the NBA with players of Jaden's shooting capability of being like, yeah, man, it's a corner three. It's a good shot. It's not a good shot for everybody. And sometimes it's really tough when the defense is guarding you in a way that is designed to get to a Jaden McDaniels corner three. Like you can't just oblige and do that 4 times in a row. And if you miss, like that's another way where the Wolves' energy just kind of drains. And I've loved what Jaden has done in being more active out of the corners, which I think has spread to his game, just overall greater activity. You mentioned the beginning of the season being rough. The first 9 games of the season, he had 22 rebounds, total rebounds. The last 9 games of the season, he has 65. This movement, this activity, this 0.5 mentality gets Jaden going. And if you want to talk about this team like leveling up and making a run, I don't think many people would point to Jaden in particular, but it needs to be Jaden because he can't be a negative. He can't be a problem from the corner because you already have a non-shooter in Gobert in your starting lineup. And Randle is a not super like guarded perimeter shooter. He shoots them, but they need it to be so that it's not both McDaniels and Gobert as spacing issues on this team. And that's what the McDaniels element of it has gone away through quick decision makings. And then the Rudy part, at least in that last game, was less, and he beat the Nuggets by 30. Man, it's like they need better offense. This is how you get it.
Is this just a little hot stretch, or do you find that there's something sustainable in here? Because the person who requested you to come on the podcast, Johnny, did also ask a question. He says, "Is there any team in the league that makes sense for Julius Randle? He's been playing better as of late, but we can't have him opt in and lose out on Naz Reid and Nah." So like, there's still concern from some Wolves fans about the Randle fit, despite the recent success, which has involved him. He's played well in some of these games. Like, I guess that's where I'm coming from with this thought here. Like, is this actually sustainable with what you're seeing? Like, is there still a need to shake up this roster as the deadline approaches?
Well, another improvement in the offense prior to the Gobert stuff and the McDaniels stuff I was just talking about is kind of in the 3-4 weeks prior to that. You go back to like the turn of the late December, early January. They really found something with the 5-out look. Gobert's off the floor, Naz Reid's at the 5, and Randle's at the 4. And oftentimes Jaden wasn't out there with him. It'd be like DiVincenzo, Alexander Walker, maybe like Mike Conley out there with him. That's 5 shooters out there. So they found more lineups that Julius can not only be a part of and effective, but almost gets it going. Like he's the engine of those 5-out offenses oftentimes, whether Ant is in there or not. He is good at, which it's hard. Talk about the Wolves fans being fed up with him. That is an understatement. It's not some. I put out like hey, send me some Wolves trade deadline screenshots. I got 133 of the trades that were sent to me, including Julius Randle.
No way.
Yeah, it's
no way.
Well, the reason behind it, Kevin, is because
the two that weren't were Randle and his wife, right? That's it.
It might have been. There was one that was Nikhil. I don't know if Julius is following me on Twitter, but the thing is there's a real fear that by Randle being here, opting into his $31 million player option for next season, or maybe even signing an extension, is that's going to come at the cost of one of Naz Reid or Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And I think in Minnesota, I mean, the fans like both of those guys, but there's a fear that because you've committed to Julius Randle, it is going to cost this team, Naz Reid down the line this summer. Naz was also going to be a free agent once he opts out of his player option. So there's just agita around kind of all things Randle related, but some of that has, I think, overshadowed the fact that Randle has gotten progressively more effective in Finch's system and in the context of this lineup. Though, you got to ask yourself the question of, like, is this the number 2 guy you want to have with Ant in this next chapter of his entering his prime? Like, it can be better, but still not the right or ideal fit. The problem is, just because you're not sure it's the right fit doesn't mean you necessarily have to trade him right at the deadline. Because, I mean, I don't know, like, what do you think that they're going to be able to get back from Julius if they put it out there?
It's tough to find something that makes any sense at all. A couple of weeks ago on the pod, someone recommended, well, how about Randle and draft picks for Cam Johnson? And it's like, well, yeah, but Brooklyn wants 2 first-round draft picks for Cam Johnson, and they're in no rush to trade him.
And the Wolves have 1 first-round pick that they can
exactly.
trade. Exactly.
So I don't know what exactly the fit is here. You're not putting Dillingham on the table in a deal like that. So I don't really know what makes sense. Like, what was the best Randle trade you got of the 133 or the 135? Yeah. Was there one that you're like, this kind of makes some sense?
Well, so a lot of them are, because Wolves are in the second apron. So it's actually like a really simple activity to put together, like Julius Randle trades. It's basically like you can't add another Wolves player into a trade. That's a rule. So it's finding like 2 players from another team that add up to less than the 33 that Julius is making this season. So it's like Malcolm Brogdon and Jonas Valanciunas. It's Lonzo Ball and Jalen Smith. I'm telling you, man, like
Lonzo. I like Lonzo.
Yeah, but like
I know he's got like bad knees, but I like Lonzo.
Pretty big Pretty big. I love Lonzo's game too. I mean, there's that like archetype of trade. That one kind of intrigues me because you could see a world with, Mike Conley aging out here, Dillingham probably not ready to take on a 30-minute role. Like, it might be good to have a 20-minute a night Lonzo Ball type of player. But I go back to, man, it's like, all right, you traded Kevin Garnett for Julius Randle for Lonzo Ball. Like, it's just like that's a pretty, and got DiVincenzo too. But like,
Cat. You said KG. You said
KG.
Kevin
Did I
Garnett.
say KG? Cat. That's bad. Like, been doing podcasts for like 2 hours this morning. But it's, yes, you go Cat to Randle to Lonzo Ball. That's, now you're really just shedding salary. Like, I don't like the idea of just a shedding salary deal. If for no other reason, then sure, Julius opts in, or you have him on draft night when you have more options to trade. There's more cap space made available. The market is cleaner for the Wolves. Like, that makes more sense to me unless they're able to get involved in a Jimmy Butler trade. And is there some sort of way by maybe like including the Detroit pick, the 1 first-round pick that they have to offer, can you get back like a Jabari Smith in that Houston deal? Can that somehow come to be? Those, if you're going to give up Julius, I want to get something back. And Jabari would be a real thing, also under contract, still on a rookie deal, all that sort of stuff. It's just the trading him for expirings is trading him for expirings, like, it's underwhelming. Even if I get the thought process behind it of like, we got to get this $30 million off the books.
It's funny you mentioned Jabari Smith. Like to me, like, I look at this Houston roster. I talked about the Rockets a bit earlier with our earlier guest, Danny Green. And we talk about the Rockets, Amen Thompson, and you got Tari Eason, these great defenders, and Jabari Smith has been out. To me, like, Jabari Smith is kind of low-key the type of asset the Rockets should be thinking about moving. I don't know if the Wolves deal would make a lot of sense. It all depends on what the context of the deal is. But for Houston, like, it could be somebody that they should think about. For the Minnesota Timberwolves, if they do move Randle, to me, it's probably going to be one of those non-obvious types of acquisitions. So, like, to your point, I don't think it's going to be a Cam Johnson. I don't think it's going to be one of these names that's out there. It's going to be a Brogdon Valanciunas, as you said, Alonzo Ball, somebody that you're not really thinking about with all the names that are really prominently out there right now in the mainstream for trades.
That's what the Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Mike Conley for D'Angelo Russell trade was.
Yes.
And that was great.
100%.
And that was the same front office. And they kind of, if you remember at that deadline, they were the ones holding up the Russell Westbrook deal with the Lakers and like them wanting to, where they dumped that Westbrook to Utah. Is that where that happened there? But the Wolves held out. And they ended up getting Mike Conley, who did unlock Rudy Gobert. And then they got Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who just seemed like a throw-in piece and has now been a huge part of the team for the past couple seasons and, you know, is free agent this summer, but, you know, could be going forward. Yeah, if they can get a Mike Conley and Nickeil Alexander-Walker type deal like they did for D'Lo, they also got 3 seconds in that deal, then yeah, like jump on it. The Wolves were not in the second apron 2 years ago when they, you know, made that trade. And it's
big difference.
Big difference, yeah.